Yeah, it's being sent to one or more apps. Well, I'm assuming that's it. I'm assuming we're on.
We are. I've just got you just got to share that YouTube link with um
It's on my page, mate. It's on there.
have you shared that YouTube link though now?
Yeah, it's being sent to one or more. Well, I'm assuming that's it. I'm assuming we're on.
We are. I've just got you just got to share that YouTube link with that's
Is that the delay? On my page, mate. It's
that's
on
not
there.
you've
That's
put
not
the
going to be annoying, isn't it? In any way, shape, or form. We're not going to hear that all night, are we?
no, I've got rid of that now. Let me just make sure it's on Facebook on mine. Have you shared it to your page, Jimmy?
It's on there, yeah. It's on. I shared it earlier. When you posted on about the event with the link, I put it up.
There were no YouTube link then though.
Where's there a YouTube link now?
Yeah,
All right, where's that come from?
because we've got we've joined YouTube.
No, no, I know that, but where do you get it from? Is it on your Facebook page?
I'm just putting it on now. I'll tag you. Yeah.
No, is anything coming on? Yeah, we're on. We are live. Right. Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, so where do you want to start?
We'll start at the start.
At the beginning, at the beginning. No, I think we pick up on last few chats. I know on the last one we were riffing a bit, we were kind of playing around with the technology, like you are doing now. But I think we pick back up again on the parent voice. I think that's important because I think it's understanding. So we had a few messages, kind of from parents and a few discussions since our last chats, really about the importance of parent voice, but more importantly, understanding the role parents have to play within building the services and within the system, but understanding the regulatory and the legislation requirements for parent voice and why it's important. So it's probably a good place to start off before we start looking at this, because I think fundamentally parents are asking to know really how do they shape services? Why is their voice important? What does the law state about having these stakeholders and this co-production?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you the code of practice, I remember going to something just after it was in Stockport, and I went there to this conference, and he spoke about the code of practice had just come out, and I remember this presentation that said, um, right towards the back
All right, so I'm
end.
going to stop you. There's a same code of practice. Let's go for the lay for like layman, for somebody like me that don't understand like what is the same code. What is the same code of practice or the code of practice? Let's kind of break it down a little bit.
Well, it's a piece of legislation, isn't it, that is designed to overarch all aspects of special educational needs and disability. So
Right.
the Children and Families Act came through, and then the Code of Practice were written post that. So the Children and Families Act were more generic and general, obviously, and then
Yeah, yeah.
the Code of Practice was developed to be shrouded around children who had disabilities and special educational needs. And basically, it's like a manual. If you're going to talk about it really simplistically, it's a manual, a guidelines, a guide, a booklet for if you like, showing people how they should and what laws they're bound by. Um, it's not an easy thing to describe, actually, a code of practice.
Yeah, yeah,
Particularly easy, but yeah, the way it were written was that it was to reflect a changing world, and it was trying to take away fundamentally a huge emphasis on statement of education and redistribute the responsibility to health and care services. Hence the name switching from a statement of education to an EHCP plan.
right.
And I went down to this particular conference, and the one thing that this particular talk was about, it was like little satellite talks. He said how the word co-production was so close to be being used actually in the code of practice, written in there constantly. And if you look, it's not written in there. It's
No, no,
talked
no.
about,
Yeah,
but they didn't make it a must. A must aspect is when it's the law. You must do
yeah,
this.
yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
So but they still wanted people to embrace co-production. And I still believe now, 10 years on, people don't really know what it means and don't fully understand how it works. And that is the whole basis of parental voice importance within the delivery of SEND services.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
when on a very, very simplistic level, a co-production can only happen between two parties, two different types of parties. And the way that it's broken down wonderfully in this particular video that I can share is it talks about the context and the process. And they're the two different groups.
yeah,
And the context in this instance we send is the families.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
When we walk through a door, say you're going into a meeting, an office somewhere, and it's empty, and you want the context and the process. When the parents and the child walk through the door, the context is in the room,
yeah.
right?
Absolutely, yeah,
When the professionals who've honed their skills in send and they've got a background in send and all those things, when they walk in the room, the process is in the room,
yes,
right? And the whole idea behind the co-production is that you meet somewhere in the middle and you find what I call a line of co-production whereby the context is valued as much as the process by the process. So the
yeah,
process people say, without the context, we don't have a job, we don't exist, we wouldn't be
yeah,
here.
yeah,
And then the context appreciates the process and the things and challenges that they face to be able to put their family life into a structured system.
yeah,
So they're the two different groups. Now, what gets mistaken a lot is that professionals believe that professionals and professionals can co-produce something. They can't.
no, of course they can't.
That what that would be then is collaboration or partnership work or whatever you want it to be. Just like parents working together, yeah, that's not co-production if they're just working with each other. It's only when the context and the process come together on a level playing field, right? And they have a distribution of power that is proportionate to the work that you're doing. And then you move down that line of co-production and create
Yes,
something. So on that level, the thing that I introduced in Barnsley was that I put a three-tier structure into how we should look at co-production in
yeah, yeah,
Sen.
absolutely.
So context, process come together and then go down the line of co-production or go up the line of co-production. So at the bottom level, not demeaning, just the first starting, is the individual co-production, which is what we referenced earlier, which is a parent, say it's a mum, dad, and a daughter who
Yeah,
has special educational needs. The individual co-production is between them and the school or with the EHCP team if they've got to that point, or with any service that they're using. They're constantly trying to co-produce something that is needs led to the child,
yeah,
right? And he is always focusing on creating better outcomes from the child. That's the primary goal. But what we've got to do is rather than being rigid, is we've got to bend because we have limitations on funding. We have limitations on both sides. So we have to bend a little bit, and co-production is not rigid, it's bendy. But for something to bend and to accept that you might not get exactly what the law says, there has to be trust. And if there's
oh yeah,
no trust, then you get that rigidity. You get bone on bone. Whereas
yeah,
if you've got trust, where a service might say, well, we can't guarantee your daughter 20 hours a week, but we're TA, but we can guarantee 15, and where possible, we'll get the other five. Just a stupid example.
yeah,
If the trust, you'll bend together. If there's rigidity, it'll be like, no, we're not going to do anything about that. We'll go to tribunal.
yeah. I get that, but I think what's from what we see on the ground is we've seemed to have fostered a culture, not us as an organisation, but as a system. We've fostered a culture where we have a lack of trust, we have a lack of transparency,
Yeah.
dialogue and communication is not happening, which has got to be the first part of building trust. You've got to be able to communicate effectively with each other, but you've also got to do it in a way where there's understanding, and you're working towards a common goal. And it seems that that's what's missing. That's what, from what every complaint we've seen that's come in, and every parent we come in, we see the lack of a common goal. We see one side, as you're saying, the process prioritizing something completely different, which could be funding, it could be whatever it might be, it could be whatever the flavor of the month might be. And then you have the kind of families trying to do the very best for their children, and they're just hitting a brick wall all the time. So as opposed to having the bend, you've got a collision, you've got an impact, and that impact is having a massive, massive effect. Um, it's having a massive effect not just to the families, but it's got to be having a massive effect to the people who are working on the ground floor, the services, the staff. Because I'm positively sure, you know what I mean. I've met a few. I have met a few, not many, but most people who get into education or into social care are doing it because they want to support, they want to do the right thing, they want to help, they want to, and it's kind of not happening. You're getting policies and procedure over legislation or over the code of practice, which is completely throwing out of the window the parent voice. All right, it doesn't state co-production within the code of practice, but it certainly states parent voice,
Oh
child
yeah,
voice.
it's a
Yeah,
presumption. It's what they want. They just didn't write it in, and they regretted it. I think the actual terminology and defining it, but it were difficult to define. But we are getting to looking at the legal side of Sen Code of Practice. There's a full section
yeah, 100%.
talks about involvement. But if you start at that point, and so you can obviously start to see that. Um, I guess from where I'm at, you look at that individual co-production, and from a very personal point of view, I've got a 14-year-old child that's registered disabled and autistic, and never never once have I seen the full weight of co-production happening. I've seen snips
Right.
of it, elements of it, but it's always usually reliant upon someone going above and beyond, and I hate that too because it tells us
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just
It's at an
moving on.
individual level. Yeah, it's an
Yeah.
individual. You get the shining stars, don't you? You get that shining star in the EHC team. You get the shining star who's giving you loads of support. I mean, Sandy are on a totally different level anyway. You know what I mean? The found Sandy has to be very, very useful. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And they are there, but then you have the shining EHA. You see these shiny little examples kind of happening, but there's no consistency.
They always leave
There's
them. That's the
yeah,
thing. You get
right,
anybody who they won't work in that system. But then if you move up to the next tier, you're kind of looking then at an organization. So if you look at for me, all the different organizations. So as a school, for instance, a primary school might say we want to do some co-production. That's not strategic. That's organizational. You might look at a specific department within the council or within the ICB. So a good example might be the local offer team or the participation team or family information services or Sendias or EHCP or inclusion team. And
yeah,
what you've got to do is you've got to say, right, we're all working, but we want to look at how we as an organization, as a team, co-produce. We are families that we're having contact with. And as I always say, and I was saying the other night, Sendias, the way that Sendias is, what the framework that surrounds Sendias was set up for this, but it takes a special kind of person like Sarah and her respective teams to deliver it. And that's why you have an SMG. In my
yeah,
ideal world, I said this 6 years ago in a presentation, culturally, our local area could have been on the map for the right reason if we'd have built an SMG type culture around every single department.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah,
what that means is you have parents and professionals in the same room. That's what the SMG does. And they
yeah,
talk, give feedback, and it's polite and it's administered properly and it's done all that. So that's the Sendias framework, but particularly in Barnsley. And I'm going to say this, and I truly mean it. I believe we have the best Sendias in the whole of the country. I do believe that. That's not rose tinted glasses. I do my research. And I believe we have the best send-us in the country. And I believe that it's a shining example of co-production through their SMG because they've taken the framework, exactly as Sarah, who's taken the framework and done it right. And that's at organizational level. So what happens then is a family can turn around and say, it's not just about their individual experience with SENDIAS, it's about how the organization and how its steering group feed back to families to say, oh, you said waiting times had risen and you were disappointed, or we weren't getting a call back. Goes through SMG process, feedback, conversation. What do we do? Okay, right, let's get a post up on social media. Let's have Facebook Lives. That's the response
yeah, yeah, yeah,
on an organizational level. If anybody in a local authority, any up and down the country, wants to see co-production at an organizational level, particularly a specific department, then Barnsley Sendias, there's no better example in the country.
yeah,
So then
yeah,
starting to see then, and then you go to the top. You go to the top level, which is strategic. And that's where the money. So when you get a pot of cash, how do you get down? How do you get that money down and used in the right way to make sure organizational co-production happens? And then the holy grail, which is individual co-production, and the real holy grail of it all is a co-responsibility of outcomes. So when your parents turn around and say, "No, no, we're responsible for this. If there's some failure, we were responsible together because we worked this together. We'll celebrate together, and we'll
yeah,
also do the problems together rather than finger pointing." That's the holy grail of co-production,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
co-responsibility. So when you go to that strategic level, and I've said this before, and I'm like a broken record, it is a top-down system. You can't work from the bottom up, right? You can't do that. You've got to work from the top. And when you look at that, that's very much about your commissioning. Your commissioning arrangements, commissioning being money coming in, what projects are we going to spend them on? There's statutory things that have to be funded, and that's all taken care of. But then as a local area, looking at your own population, your own demographics, your ethnicities, your all your numbers and your figures, how are you drawing on that information and doing creative and transparent and co-productive commissioning? And sadly for me, I don't see it. I've had 10 years in this process, and I've never once been approached by a commissioner and said, Jonathan, not that they should approach me individually, or I've been in a room and said, what could we produce? What's a service we could fund that will make send families' lives better? What's a new and innovative project that we could do?
mm.
Yeah, I could reel off 15 in an evening.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
All of us. That's not about me, it's about
yeah,
all of us. And then you've got this mind mapping space where then you've got strategic commissioning. And then what you do is you share the outcomes. If it don't go well, you say, no, we did it together, we worked together, we failed together. But if it
Yeah,
goes
yeah,
well,
yeah,
we work together, we celebrate together. So for me, the issues lie at the commissioning level,
yeah,
and then also at elected cabinet level, elected leaders, because
yeah, yeah.
they're not so they're taking what is said to them as read.
Yes, and we've seen a prime example of that, of what's happening with one of our local schools. And I think it's important, and I'm just going to kind of reflect on this because I'm sure we'll have parents at the moment screaming at the screen about kind of the comments made about Sendias. But I want to highlight this because that is a decision at strategic level. You have a team that's doing very, very well and probably one of the best in the country for doing what they do, and it's massively under-resourced and understaffed. So you know what I mean? You've got calls going in and out of Sendias where they could be doing with more and more input and more resources, more and more staff to be able to work directly on the coal face with the parents. Um, but yeah, we're not seeing hardly any recruitment. We're seeing send improvement officers being advertised, seem to be
And
now weekly. Yeah, 48,000, whatever it is, whatever they're going at 24 to 48 grand a year. But you're not seeing the actual key workers. You've got a team that's doing well and can have a lot of input, gather a lot of data, which can then move forward to co-production. But the decision at the top level, the strategic level, is yeah, let's kind of ignore that part down here, which seems to be working, and we'll kind of take our time on looking at what we're going to come on to a minute, like task and finish groups for the autism strategy.
well, the good example you raised a good point with Sendias, I mean, Sendias is probably one of my specialist subjects, just because I think it's a wonderful service in terms of how it was created. I think it's something that should be embraced. Something that's really interesting for me is that when you look at Sendias in our local area, there's something really strange happened, and I've got a real issue with this, and that is during the Send local area inspection in 2021, in September 2021. If you look at that inspection result, it actually at the first paragraph, in the first paragraph, so the most important thing, feedback, is Sendias. But what
Right.
annoyed me so much is everybody knows it via it's an acronym, SENDIASS. But what it stands for, Send Information Advice and Support Service, right?
Yeah.
It was written out. So they writ it all out, the acronym, and it was almost as if I can't, I'm speculating, almost as if they didn't want us to see that it was Sendias. They wanted it almost to be that it fell under, we had to say it because it had received that much positive feedback
Yeah.
from families and from services. Let's not forget this. Your youth offending team, your health services, speech and language services, your schools. Our Sendias, when I sat on SMG, when I was a volunteer there, our Sendias has never ever been refused access to any local school. Never.
Right.
Never
Yeah.
once
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
the point where Sendias has been asked in its all entirety. What does that tell you about the quality
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
not the manager, but of the people that she employs to work alongside her?
Mm.
And what annoys me is, and get this for a statistic, not only in that time, in these 4 years that's passed between one inspection and the forthcoming one, it was suggested that there would be reviews done, service reviews. The only service that was reviewed and publicly reviewed was Sendias. They've
Right.
not and when I say review, recommendations, the reviews there, they didn't release the full review and they released a shortened review. And the sad thing were they went after him. Somebody went after that Sendias, right? And it were there's been in that 4 years, James, they've not reviewed anybody else. They've not reviewed inclusion services. They've not reviewed speech and language therapy services, to my knowledge. They've not reviewed EHCP. They've not reviewed anybody else. So the one shining star got ended up getting treated badly, but
And
still
potentially silenced slightly.
silent. But the
Yeah.
problem that I have is this. is all it can be regarded as, while ever there's no good commissioning, while ever there's no innovative commissioning, which would require parental involvement. Sendias is designed to be a reactive service. It reacts to
Yes,
the
yes, 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 yes.
behaviors
Yeah.
of other services. But with the skill set that these people have, the workers, and particularly the
Mm.
manager, why can't an arm of Sendias be a proactive service? Why can't
Oh
that
yeah,
be? You
yeah,
know,
we had this discussion the other day. You kind of, I mean, you could take the EHA team for argument's sake, and you could put that as that reactive arm, which is a totally independent group to be able to go out and actually physically work with the parents to establish the needs, to become the conduit to the other services, to make the referrals. I mean, at the minute, it's sat underneath social care, which is taking really away, right, it's taken away the description of social work to me. You know what I mean? You have an organisation, social care, that will only step in if there's neglect and abuse in the family. That's not social care. You know what I mean? That's child protection. You know what I mean? So why bad yourself up as social care um, when you could be doing so much more? Everything just seems to be disjointed. Everything seems to be in the wrong place,
when
the
you look
wrong
at the
level of control.
disabled children's team, right? And it's for me, I've always said this, and I've got a foot in the game with this history, and I'm not going to go into that tonight. But for me, that like what doesn't seem to be able to interpret or compute is that social care, through no fault of anybody's, has become this service that has to protect, has to safeguard and go out. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot of the time it's when there's parental failure or parental
Yes, yes.
parents. Okay.
Which it needs to do. That definitely work needs to happen. Yes, let's be clear on that. Yeah,
But what it's become this service that saves people it saves vulnerable children and young people from adults that are neglecting them. Obviously, there's a really basic viewpoint, but what I'm trying to say is culturally, if you talk to people, when I talk to a lot of people, talk to a lot of young people because of my daughter, and you hear people and they say, why do you want to go into social care? They want to go into social care to save and to help young people,
yeah,
kids who are having a
yeah,
tough
yeah,
time. So that's synonymous with that vocation. The
yeah.
DCT, the vast majority of clients, young people, families that are involved with the DCT don't need saving, they just need supporting on a high level.
Yes, yes,
Right?
absolutely.
So,
Yeah, yeah,
so culturally, for me, the DCT is a completely different mindset that you require of a social worker. And some I've met a couple, particularly two, sadly, one particularly not working in our borough, the best social worker I've ever met. But the point being is that they're not, you've got to come into your house not trying to save the children. They've got to come in with a mentality in coming into the house to support the family and to keep the
yes,
familial relationships bonding. Because
yes,
what we've all been presented with is a future, is a life that you couldn't plan for.
yeah,
You couldn't plan for this life in
yeah.
99% of the time. Me and my ex-wife didn't know we were going to end up with a child that had learning disabilities.
No,
And
absolutely. Yeah,
we didn't plan for this.
and you definitely didn't do it for the disability living allowance or PIP.
No,
Yeah,
it's not work. I would have done another
yeah,
shift. No, I'd have worked a
yeah,
shift and have gone on taxes. But that's the thing. And I think culturally what's happened is that we've got away from this concept that you go for a Section 17, which is a welfare report. It's not, it's a supportive report. It's not a report that's supposed to make you scared. And when we
yeah.
first had our first welfare report conducted by the best social worker that I've had experience with, I felt like it felt like someone were putting their arms around our family.
Wow. Yeah, yeah. That's social care,
That
including the
was
total title. Yeah.
around our family, James, not around our children. They didn't
Yes.
come
Yeah, yeah,
to us. The social
yeah.
worker came to us to talk about familial relationships and wrote a report on all the family members who were being affected, the siblings as well, most importantly, that we've
Yeah,
talked about. So from that point of view, it really feels like we're a long way away. Even 10, that were 10 years ago now since I had
yeah,
that set.
we are. Yeah, we are.
It feels
I
like,
think as well, we got to, I mean, from my own experience, I think we'll move on. I think social care is something we can pick up another night, but it's strange what we're seeing at the moment where the service is designed to protect your child and potentially throwing them into harm's way. But that's a topic we'll come on about. I think what I'm going to go back to is the co-production side of things, and one piece of work which is kind of very close to both our hearts, which is the piece of work which the local authority are holding up as a shining example of co-production. And I think we'll go back onto the autism strategy if we can. Yeah, I'm kind of looking at focusing at it. I've read through this task and finish report. What's your general idea overview of this report before we start? We're going to put some links up, I think, on my page so people can access this and have a look at and read of it. And parents with children who are autistic can kind of do a bit of a deep dive. But I want to kind of touch base on this if I can, and touch base on the autism strategy because I think it's, as you rightly say, the majority of send in our town, in our wonderful world of Barnsley, are autistic. We are seeing the rise of social, emotional, and mental health. Totally different thing, but well, I kind of focus on the autism side of things for tonight if we can.
yeah,
Um,
I mean, in terms of disability, I think there's a really important distinction for me that I will never lose sight of, and that is for me there's SEN, it's SEND, and whilst I completely appreciate legally and in whatever context, autism, be it whatever stage on the spectrum, whichever it
yeah, yeah,
falls, is considered a disability. I think in the future that won't be the case. I don't think all people who are autistic will be considered a disability. I think neurodivergence will come through and it'll just be a more inclusive world. But
yes, yeah,
what I must paraphrase all this with, sorry, pretext all this with is we've got some really disabled young people in our borough. We've got some physically really not that are not autistic, some that are autistic, that are really physically disabled, and they really need the support and help. And sometimes, a lot of the time, I believe that these wonderful children and their unbelievably hardworking parents feel like the poor relative in the town.
yeah,
That said, the discussion that we've come on to talk to about tonight is the meteoric rise in autism nationally, but also as the biggest resource puller in our borough. I think that's the
yes,
terminology,
yeah.
is that it's pulling on so many resources, the diagnoses of autism and ADHD, but autism. We're not here to say why it's happening. We're not here to say what we believe. That's I'm not expert enough to know that.
No,
But
no, no, no.
but the predictions are there. The projections are there in documents that I've seen. And we've got a local area that knew and knows and has done for the last 10 years its projections on autism. Okay. So
Yeah,
that's what I want to preface all this with, is that the projections are there, it's been known. And 10, 11 years ago, I was part of trying to build a free school for which were fully inclusive. It were 40% autistic children and 60% mainstream, and it were going to be a free school. And Barnsley Council would not back it. It was Greenacre before it became Wellspring, and there were a
yeah,
lot of people who were supporting it, including the DFE who were interested in it. The local authority wouldn't back it. Twice we asked them to back it, and they wouldn't. And you can look up the
right.
newspaper. So, coming back to what you're saying in terms of the autism strategy, this is not news. This is not new. So there's the autism strategy, and what the task and finish group appear to have done is use the headers from the autism strategy framework and done what you might call, if you want to call, or they would call, an analysis of our current state of play with autism in the borough. Is that
Yeah,
fair point? I don't know.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah,
So
we're gonna go. I think we're gonna go through the report. I've highlighted some bits, and maybe you can kind of shed some light on it because I found it very. I think the biggest thing what hits me on this report is because it's such a major area of SEND within Barnsley, is the lack of any kind of data on this report, any data, whether it's
hard.
quantitative, qualitative. Yeah, there's literally nothing. It's vague. It's very wishy-washy in its writing, and more important, there's no real. I get the feeling there's no real consultation. I can't see the co-production within this, and I'm gonna refer you to. I'm just going to read one part out. So this is on the introduction. So the findings and recommendations. The report's called "The Findings and Recommendations of Barnsley OSC Autism TFG," and we've got the introduction. We've got some nice little bits and bobs at top, but then we've got down. The group would like to take this opportunity to give thanks to all officers, which is an alarming statement to start off with straight away, who engaged with the process and provided information to support their investigation. Additionally, the group would like to give special thanks to service users, autism strategy stakeholders, group representation who participated in the SUSA meetings and provided valuable insight. I can't find any information on these meetings. I can't find any minutes. I've dug deep. I've done like deep dives on this. I can't find any consultation. So I'm struggling to find out to start off with how we've got this task and finish group and really who are they? You know what I mean? I can't see the parent voice in it. Put it.
No, I I mean, I've got so many opinions on it. It's unbelievable. So, in terms of the autism strategy, it's been made into this thing that if I'm being honest, a lot of local areas, it came out of the framework. They worked on it a bit. They had a forum that were established. They worked on it. They consulted on it with families, and they threw it out there. And the vast majority of local areas, local authorities, local schools, local autism specialists just thought it was just a tick box exercise, just to clear that up, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
not, it's not going to change the lives of children. It's not. It's not because it's a generic piece of work that is an identifier. So it's not totally pointless, but it's an identifier. It helps to start the conversation. It helps the local area think about the five or six main categories that they might need to think about to be able to make autistic people more inclusive in their local area. And
Yeah.
then they ask you to go through it, use that as a footprint, like a header and footer, and go through it. And it weren't that big a deal. But what happened, you see, is the local authority and the local ICB, as it is now, they tried putting it through without any real work done with parents. And when we were the forum, we sat in a meeting and we said this is not acceptable. So it were all built up and it were made out to be right. We've got to do this right, which is the right decision by the most executive person in the overview.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, in the oversight board. But the key thing was it was just taken. If I'm being honest, it was just taken too serious, and because it weren't that important, the work that needed to be done was very much all about consultation and co-production. It was about how many lives of autistic people and their families can we touch. That's where I would have focused my work.
Yes, yeah, 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 yeah,
But instead, what they did is they went more insular and they went to Bernardo's, which is a local charity piece of work, which the volunteers do some great work. No one's denying that. And a local authority member of staff said to Bernardo's, "You're the only autism parent group in the town." To which I said later on, I said, "Well, it's the only autism specific parent group in the town. There's loads of autism parent groups that have autistic parents of autistic children in their groups
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
also deal with other issues. It don't mean to say they're any less expertise." So it was this channeling and controlling element of we don't want to open Pandora's box too wide. That's how it felt, And I think what speaks testament to it all is all the parents that the number of parents that were involved in the autism strategy from Bernardo's will not have anything to do with it now. They walked away before it was finalised.
Well, that's the litmus test, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the litmus test. Yeah, yeah,
So clearly, there's been doors open, Pandora's box opened a bit more. I do know information, but it's not for me to share. But it has basically caused a huge rift in the local area.
yeah, yeah,
Now, in terms of that, I think that because this autism strategy has not worked out how they wanted it, in the sense that it would just uh, rack it, pack it, and stack it, yeah, I think then they've thought, right, we've got an inspection coming up. We've always had problems in autism. We've got problems with exclusions that probably relate to autism. We've got huge problems with youth justice system that relate to
yes,
autism. We need to do, and what the cabinet, you could argue, or what the local leaders did, the ruling cabinet did cleverly, is they made it a cross-party task and finish group, which does happen, but this one was, I think it was led by a Lib Dem, and I'm sure, I think I know the reasons why things were done the way they were. But what annoys me, James, is I'm seeing, we had a chat about this. We had the Lib Dems all there in that photo other day with their
yeah,
arms
yeah.
crossed at one decision. Where are they for the autistic families with this task and finish report, with the autism strategy? Why aren't they crossing their arms for that photograph?
I think what's really, really damning on this is when you actually do read the report, and like I say, I'll put this up. When you look at the areas on the findings for investigations, you get two, three key points. Um, and some of the stuff it refers to in these key points, which has obviously been around for some time, like the bar. I'll pick this out and maybe you can go through it because I've never heard of this. You know what I mean? I've heard of the Barnsley Council Send Inclusion Toolkit. What I've never heard of is the Barnsley Autism Friendly Schools Initiative. Yeah, I mean maybe I should send some, but it's referenced in this report. So, to, what is a a Barnsley Autism Friendly school? Because the schools where we're seeing the complaints coming through with children who are autistic, they must be working on some totally different toolkit. I just don't. I don't get it. I don't see it.
I think I know what it is. I think if you put a sensory room in your school,
All right. Or you give them a pass.
that's it. Yeah, yeah.
Right, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Obviously, I'm being
yeah,
incredibly facetious, but this is the problem. This is the problem. It's this peppered viewpoint of autism. I'm sat here, me, right, tonight, and I'm not talking about autism. I'm talking about how autism's not being dealt with properly. I
yeah,
can't talk about autism, right? I've got one version of an autistic child, right? And he's severely autistic.
yeah,
And my life is not like the life of so many people who, my son goes to a really specialist school, and I've got my version of autism, which is my beautiful, beautiful boy. But in terms of thinking about trying to be a parent to a child that is autistic in a mainstream school, I don't know anything. And this is the whole point of parent voice, is that it's not about saying I'm this, I recognize this, I do this, I can do this, me. It's about saying I'll get us there. Let's find a way to get there to have a voice. But then you've all got to come. You've all got to
oh,
come, and
100%, yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
I don't know what it's like, James, to
yeah.
send a kid off to one of these huge academies that
Mainstream school, yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah, and be the father or the mother of an autistic child that's going to have to go and try and survive in that environment.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's a
And
horrible role.
facing that ongoing war and battle,
Yeah, and I
yeah,
don't. So when people talk about lived experience, what I said about this report and this task and finish group and on all of it is I didn't feel my child's footprint on it,
yeah,
but
yeah. Well,
but
that's well, we certainly haven't.
yeah, I don't feel anything about, the big part of the footprint for me with my son would be how are we taking care of
Yeah,
siblings.
yeah. What's
So
interesting in this strategy as well, you've got to bear in mind this is an all age autism strategy. So if you take my oldest son, who's now 29, yeah, coming on to 30, living in supported living as an autistic person, nobody sent him a survey out. Nobody sent him a consultation out. Nobody's engaged with him. And he won't be the only adult that people have not engaged with. Yeah. They might have gone to adult groups who have autistic people there, but then you've got the not the service users filling out the reports or whatever. You've got other lanyard wearers doing it. I think we've kind of we're not seeing. I can't see the co. I've got to be honest. I can't see the co-production of this. And when so a great example for me is when the newspaper article broke when it said, "Oh yeah, we're kind of we've got some issues regarding the autism strategy. You know what I mean? We've got some severe concerns, worries. You know what I mean? We've got work to do on it." Not one school has posted out and said to all our parents who've got autistic children, "Let's get together. Let's all meet in the hall, yeah, and we'll have a little conference and a little chat, and you tell us what we want." Not one school's done that. It's not
No.
got out on any social medias or nothing. Our favourite school at the top of it. That's not happened. You know what I mean? That would be the simplest fix. The most simplest fix is have an open evening, get all your parents together who've got autistic children, you know, and gather feedback and gather information. As local MPs haven't done it.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
But
I
what
mean,
we've
you know
turned
what? Considering certain schools and certain places have had hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds to
oh God,
create,
yeah.
yeah, through HS through INES provision capital allocations grant. They've
Yes,
had
yeah.
in 2021, they've had hundreds of thousands of pounds, up to upwards of £1 million to promote and to provide specialist autism provision. You know, Peniston Grammar School is one of them. They've had nearly £1 million, you know, to create that provision, the heart space provision. Takes 52 children from what, you know, great. But, you know, it doesn't just stop with giving a kid a place. This autism strategy is about acceptance. And it's acceptance can often be requiring of celebration. And one of the things that really frustrates me is that, you know, and it's not about what about in and saying we shouldn't be doing it, but I do get frustrated when I see that we've just started, I think yesterday or today, 1 month of LGBTQ plus awareness, 1 month of
Yeah,
awareness.
yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
got its place. Yeah, it's got its place in life. But yeah, you're right. Yeah,
Yeah. And it's like, you know, I look at all the young people who are struggling and suffering, young men that are suffering, and the awareness campaigns that need to be to be put forward, the young women that are struggling with anorexia nervosa and all the eating this, all the things, and it does bother me, and it's not about saying they don't deserve it, but it's about
no,
awareness. You know, this I didn't feel this footprint, but I'll tell you something now. When the time's right, we'll feel the footprint of all the other awareness campaigns this next month.
yeah. I think to be fair, the LGBTQ is a good one to pick up on because if you look at the percentage of people within that community, autistic people and neurodiverse people fit highly. You know what I mean? There's a high number within that community. Do you know what I mean? And that's part of the neurodiversity. It's part of understanding where they fit in.
Yeah,
Understand. So I actually do feel because they're getting bombarded on two elements. You know what I mean?
yeah,
They're getting on, yeah. So that social construct of where do you fit in within school, where do you fit in within society? If them open conversations aren't taking place between parent carer groups and these young people there with staff, if you can't have that we're right back to where we are at the beginning. If you can't have that open dialogue and that open communication and respect each other as individuals or you know what I mean, as people, if you can't have that respect, that trust is never going to be there. How can you consult? How can you gather data and put it into an autism strategy or a task and finish group? How's that? How you just it's physically there's no data. There's nothing gone into this. I think
no,
this is a game we're at that distorted strategic level, which is telling people what they want to see in this report. It's not coming from the bottom up, and it's not coming from. I think it's certainly not coming from the bottom up and the top down and meeting some in the middle. It's coming from the top down.
So let me break down what let me just clear something up, a couple of points here, right? And that is when the reference which is today um about the 1 month beginning of LG, the awareness. When you look at protected characteristics, and this is my bugbear, this is just my bugbear for the disabled community, for the special educational needs and disability community. When you look at the Equality Act 2010, if any other minority group or any other group with a protected characteristic, be that race or ethnicity, the sexuality, sexual orientation, if any other protected characteristic were being treated
Yeah,
in such a
yeah,
terrible way that disabled children are being treated, then there would be absolute uproar. And that's the point that I'm making. It's not
yes,
about what they refer to as whataboutery. It's not about demeaning or saying that's less worthwhile. That's not who I am.
yeah,
I
yeah,
would
yeah. No, I get that. I get that.
I would never be a whatabouterer. But what I do want to raise the point, and it needs making aware, is that all it needs? Is all it needs to cover autism, uh, a piece of crap autism strategy. I'm going to call it what it is because I don't know. I don't know what it even does. And then a task and finish group that is not co-produced. There's no parents on it, or there's parent governor, but there's no specific forum or strategic representation on it. Is that all you have to do for that protected characteristic? Is that
Yeah,
all you
yeah,
have?
yeah.
Right.
No, no, I've got to agree with you there. Yeah, yeah,
Can you imagine if
yeah.
that's all we had to do for the other protected characters? If all that we were doing for the other protected characters, right, write a strategy about black and ethnic minorities. We'll have a task and finish group. Bob's your uncle, Fanny's your aunt, everything's done now. There'd be uproar. And these are protected characteristics, and that's why I'm banging that drum. Because if
Yeah,
no
no,
one
I get it. I get it. I get it. Yeah,
it absolutely blows my mind. The Equality Act 2010 is clear, absolutely clear. Now, what I see a line here, right? So this is where it's really important for people to try to understand what the word co-production means and where it is happening and where it isn't happening. So one of the things that I developed, because I've worked on this for a lot of years now, I really love it. I don't say it to show off, I just say it because I love it. And I broke down basically something, I created something called Know Your Co, right? So it would know your CO co-production, for instance. And it were a linear thing. It's a linear thing. And what it does is it highlights at the first end of beginning to consult or to have anything to do with taking people's voice in, you have cooperation, which is like participation. So you ask people to cooperate with something, yeah? It's like a
yeah, yeah, yeah.
co-op, you know, you say co-op, you co-op you're opting in. And then the next stage, after someone's participated, so you might go to an event. So there's an event tomorrow, right? Big event
Yeah, yeah.
tomorrow.
Yeah, we're going, aren't we? We're going. We'll be there.
Yeah, but we're not going to advertise it. So you go along and you're cooperating in that, you're participating in it. The next stage that you go to is someone might come up to you who's there or a stall and say, "Do you want to fill this survey in?" It's like, yeah, yeah, sure. So that becomes a form of consultation,
Yes. Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And then where I go with it then is that I say, right, the next stage is we have co-design. So we start to look at how we're going to co-produce. Okay. So how are we going to co-produce? So we co-design. We look at the structures and the elements of how we're going to do a piece of co-production, and we decide what's fair and what's not fair. And that's moved up from consultation because that's just someone asking your opinions to then you being an equal around the table.
Look at the mechanics of it. Yeah.
Yeah, you go to co-designing the
Yes.
co-production.
Yeah. Yeah.
Once you've designed it, you need to produce it. So you do the
Yes.
piece of co-production, right? And then the fifth element in it is co-responsibility. So when you've done all those other things and you're happy with all how those processes have been followed, you say, this is not you, Barnsley Local Authority, or you, Barnsley South Yorkshire ICB. You're going to bear the brunt of all this, whether it's good or bad. If it's good, we'll put our hands up and say, brilliant. If it's bad, it's your fault and we're buggering off. What co-responsibility is saying, we did that together, we stand together. Yeah.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
that's my 5 stages of voice. Okay.
Yeah,
So you look at this task and finish group, right? The first thing, theme one, improving understanding and acceptance of autism within society. 4.1, the officers talk through the development of the Barnsley All Age Autism Strategy 24 to 2030,
yeah,
highlighting the co-production with stakeholders, including young people with autism, parents, carers, professionals from health, education, and volunteering sector. So let's strip that down. They're calling it all co-production. It wasn't. They did some participation events, not
yeah,
co-production, but people went along. They did some consultation through some surveys, not co-production, consultation,
yeah,
right? There were no co-designing, so nobody said, how are we going to do the co-production? It was
yeah, yeah,
decided.
yeah,
I know that. Okay, I know that.
yeah.
And the reason I know that is because I made the recommendations and they copied them and nicked them off me, but that's another story.
Right, okay.
So there were no co-design with the people that were going to co-produce, and the number of people they actually co-produced the strategy war with was, and I know this, it was less than 4 parents and less than 3 young people.
Right, right. Were they related to the any LA officers by any chance?
No, no, the young people, from what I can gather, I don't really like to talk about the young people, if
No,
I'm being,
that's fine. Yeah.
but
Well, that's yeah.
the parents came from Bernardo's. That's where they came from.
Right.
And they've walked away. I've got no right to talk about them, but they were brought in, and then before it were finalized, before it were completed, and all this were done, they walked away. So there's something going to come out, isn't there?
Yeah. Well,
They
no one knows
walked,
what. Probably.
and they were part of consortium as well, and they
Mm.
walked away from that. The staff still go. The staff still go to the consortium meetings from Bernardo's, but no parents go. And
Mm.
this is what we're dealing with. It's all behind closed doors. Why on earth a consortium that the DFE have backed and says is doing well? They said we're doing well 7 months ago. Why the consortium that's supposed to have been running closer to 2 years than it is to 1 year? Why are they not on the task and finish group? Why is there not 2 reps on there? Why was the consortium
Mm.
not on the autism strategy
They're
board?
not mentioned. They're not mentioned. No. No.
So
Strange.
it's not. It's weird, and the thing I think Barnsley local area believes that they can hoodwink Ofsted and CQC, that they can present a fur coat because
Yeah.
they're willing to spend so much money on advertisements, Facebook pages, websites, events. You know, what people just like, oh look, flashing lights.
Yeah.
They think that we're daft.
Yeah. Well, this report definitely shows that. Like I say, I go back to how many all you got to do is look at the Send Inclusion Toolkit and the Barnsley Autism Friendly Schools Initiative. Look at the ideal picture they're presenting. To just look what's going off on the ground when it comes to parents dealing with Senkos within schools, and none of it's happened. None of it's implemented. They've not implemented any of that. So then you're back to, are you even going to implement any of this autism strategy? It's smoke and mirrors at the highest level for me, and it's misdirection. Because while they're saying and clapping and cheering and going, yeah, we have this autism strategy and everything's going to be well, and autistic people in Barnsley are going to live the same lives as every other person. have the same opportunities. The reality is that's not what's going to happen. So, where do you see the future? Where do you see the future of services? I mean, you're good at reading the algorithms, aren't you? You're a bit like me. You read the patterns, you look for the patterns, you read the algorithms. Where do you think the future of autism lies within Barnsley? So I
I
have
think
my views.
I think the thing that you must always recognize is when you're becoming out of touch. And I'm becoming out of touch. I know I am. And so for me, my focus has always been on the process of how we get voice. So
Yeah,
6 years ago, my voice were relevant and I weren't out of touch. But now, James, my son's in a specialist provision and he's come on no end. And it's not it's not easy, like anybody, it's not easy, but he's got a good school. Me and his mum are separated, so in some ways, uh, you get bits and bobs of support in that way. Not that that's a good thing per se, but you just have to take rough with small. And,
yeah,
and and so I'm always at pains to say, like, I'll talk and I'll have strong opinions on all the things that I am relevant in, but in terms of I'm getting old, and I'm getting
yeah,
out of date.
yeah,
And it's really important that I get that across, that two old blokes talking about it. The voice is out there, but what I see is that if you have not got a governance and structured system for gathering parent voice, all you're going to ever have is that year's trend.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
a
An
bit like.
agenda. Yeah,
Yeah. So there'll be people come along, and I'm with the greatest respect, what they're saying makes sense, but it's already been said 3 and 4 times before. It's
yeah,
already a
yeah, yeah,
generation. There's three or four sub generations of, every 5 years, it's like a sub generation in send. You get your 0 to 5, your 5 to 10, your 10 to 15, your 15 to 20. It's like every 5 years there's a sub generation. And people say, oh, parents are falling out in bands or not. What it is they're going to do, because the services are almost pitted us against each other.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
from my point of view, what is needed more than anything is governance and structured parental voice. And what I think you would see is the way forward and on how we deal with all. So we're talking about autism tonight, but you'd be able to put anything in that coin sorter. Personally, my fears about autistic people across the whole range of spectrum, I'm really, really worried. Like
Mm.
really,
Yes, yeah,
um, and it's a really strange thing because, and I've always been honest with this with my friends, so I'm happy to be honest here tonight. Is I I know that in some ways, because my son is so disabled, I, I've only really got to worry about when I'm not here.
right.
That's what I'm
Yeah,
getting.
yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah,
while
yeah,
I'm here, I feel as though I, his life is relatively simple enough for me and his mum and a decent school to give him a really good quality of life. Yeah.
yeah.
So in some respects, I, I take my hat off to people who are trying to to fit their square peg, as awful as that sounds, but you know what I mean. Their
Yeah.
square peg of a child into the round hole that society says that they must fit. And when a kid is aware enough, my son's not aware of what a lot of young people are aware of. He's aware of lots
Mm.
of things, but he's happy and he's not searching to have peers in the broad. He has got peers, he's searching for them things, but he's not going to get depressed because he don't fit in.
Yeah, yeah,
And
that's exactly my concern. And unfortunately, I've seen this happening now twice personally. I mean, I've done loads of work. I've done loads of pieces of work in the past and studied, and I'm very academic and looked at causes and root causes of various different things. But if you take mental health as one, when you have that internal conflict, yeah, within yourself where you don't know who you are, you have no self-identity, no self-esteem, or you're trying to fit into something that you're not, yeah, that's when mental health problems arise. Yeah, and that is what we're going to see. We're going to see a massive, massive increase in mental health problems. If we go down this route of trying to force autistic people to conform through behavior management, which is what we're seeing. We're seeing exclusions going up, suspensions going up. Um, we're gonna have a system that's broke. We're not going to get anywhere near what this autism strategy says. I mean, that's my personal. That's what I've experienced. That's what I see on the shop floor when we see these parents coming forward, and you have the young person who's aware of themselves. They're aware of what the brain doesn't kind of sometimes connect it all together. Yeah, obviously we know how the condition kind of works, but then they're trying to fit into social constructs. Yeah, they're trying to find image, they're trying to find belonging, they're trying to find where they sit in that hierarchy. Yeah, and then they're being forced to sit there and go through that day in, day out, day in, day out. And one of the things it looks like here is about kind of how to remove barriers and looking at school attendance and how to find routes into kind of improve school attendance. We're not seeing that. We're seeing the opposite. Yeah, we're seeing more and more barriers being put up. We're seeing more and more young people with autism being put onto partial timetable. I hate that partial timetable. Do you know what I mean? That's you've kind of you're kind of at that point where you're already writing these young people off. And I'll go back to the point I made when we were having our little riff the other day, when we had a tag worker and a adult social care worker sat in the room with my autistic son, who's 18, not 28, not 38, not 48, and I'm turning around and saying, "What are you going to do now? Sign on universal credit?" That is the reality. And I'll open the question up out there because again, I unfortunately I don't have the experience, and I'm not fortunate, and you know what I mean. I ain't taking this away, but there are families out there what have very very positive experiences, and the young people are thriving. You know what I mean? It's kind of, but there's no coming together. There's no debate. There's no, you kind of shut down. If you're in this, if you're in my situation, and as many other families are, you're shut down dead. Do you know what I mean? You're not listened to. You put your complaints through, they're ignored. So I'm going to throw that question out there to anybody else out there who has an autistic child, who has any, no matter what age, yeah, to kind of jump onto the groups. If you're happy to share your experiences, yeah, let's hear your voice, yeah, because my experience is a negative one. Your experience, Jonathan, I wouldn't say is a negative one. You know what I mean? It's not one you want to be going through. But when it comes to your son, you're kind of happy, aren't you? Not
I'm
happy,
yeah.
but
I think the ad is I am I hadn't had a positive experience with services, and what is often, I just don't talk about myself,
yeah,
and
I
I'm
know, I know,
starting
I
to
know,
fight
I
it.
know, I know.
But I've
Yeah,
had two tribunals. For my son to get to the specialist provision they had, I've been through two tribunals,
right.
and and I've we've had some, I've had horrendous situations,
Yeah,
and I will stuff that I'll never ever forgive some people for, and the way that they've dealt with it. And I felt that my son, has been um, systemically neglected. When you look at the 14 years of his life, he marries up. If you look at the 2008 banking crisis, and that's what's that? 16 years ago, 17 years ago. That 210, 17 years ago, and so we were just starting to feel the impact. I remember my ex-wife having his first daughter, who's 20 months older. I remember all the maternity services being brilliant. Yeah, really like brilliant. And then we had his son, Billy, 20 months later. It's not to do with his condition. And the difference in 20 months, following all the global problems and the economies
Yeah,
in
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
global,
yeah.
the difference was just unbelievable. Not the staff, just the cuts and the lack of people. And I look back and I almost think like I look at everything, we've been through austerity, we've been through all these things and COVID and all these things. And I look at the impact that that's had on someone who's lived 14 years who's severely and classically autistic and disabled, they're learning disabled. And I look at it and I think, he could have um he could have had a much easier, better
Yeah,
pathway
yeah.
in his life. So, but I think for me, the hard miles, I was talking to my mum earlier, from zero, well, from about 12-month old when he started to regress through to probably about 8, 9. They were the years that you were just surviving. Um, so I think anything seems all right. But I look at a lot of parents who the kids deserve a low ratio number of pupil to staff in a calm environment that's
Low arousal approach. Yeah, 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 yeah.
geographically close, relatively close to their own home. What the bloody hell have we got ourselves into? How have we got to a point in this country? And I look at this town with the amount of money we've spent on capital projects. And everybody will say, oh, it's from this funding. You choose the regenerative work that you're doing. You choose which funding
Yeah,
pots
yeah,
you.
yeah.
Let's not go into that myth of everything. And
No,
I look at us with the 37th, 38th most deprived area in the country, and all I see week in, week out, children having to be referred for smoking cessation things at 12-year-old this week, youth crime through roof higher than national average, number one area for parent fines since they introduced laws, highest on exclusions, highest on suspensions, outcomes for education going through floor, social care went into special measures, two of our homes. This is all in the last 5 years, and then that's just one part. It's just a list. Send children's outcomes low. HCPs through the roof, safety valve, which means we're one of the 38 most worst performing send I block funding local areas in the country.
mm,
We are failing. We are failing, and it needs to
yeah,
be highlighted.
absolutely. Yeah, we are failing. You are right. Too many families actually operating in survival mode, and they're just existing. They're
Yeah,
existing. Um, and we need to kind of get that change. So, please, everyone, anybody who's listening, let's kind of get your comments up on online if we can. Let's try and drive this voice. Let's try and even if you don't agree with us, put your point forward. We're here for debate. We're here for honest discussion. I think that's the only way we're going to get through this so-called sane crisis is by talking to each other. But being realistic, you're not going to get on with everybody. Yeah,
yeah. It's shared outcomes. It's not necessarily shared opinions. You know,
yeah.
You've got to have those shared outcomes. Is there anything? Yeah, I just dropped your message actually, James. In I was wondering, have you got a chat on here as well? Um,
Right. Yeah.
but first,
Yeah. No, we've had. I mean, to be fair, it's not just us voicing this either, is it? It's not just. Well, we know it's not just me and you sat here. We've obviously we put together our report where parents have come forward. But we've got to be clear, it's not just parents that have come forward. We have had some professionals come forward. Well, not me personally, but obviously they've approached you. So, is there anything kind of on the whistleblower front?
I think it's I can sit here and I think a lot of. I was talking to a friend who was a SEN parent earlier, and I was talking about, people see you come online and they see you talk and you look relaxed and whatever, and you seem confident or whatever word you want to use. But there's sometimes like your only way of dealing with something is is to is to go on the front foot.
Yeah,
And uh,
absolutely. Yeah.
I've got no desire whatsoever to talk about the emotional impact that being involved in parent voice has had on me, on my
No,
general
no,
health.
no, no, yeah.
I'm not going to go into that details. It's not something I need to share. But what I would say is that particularly in the last 6 months, um, I've become quite scared, if I'm being honest, or fearful. And what I mean by that is I'm not shaking in my boots. I'm not, you know, worried about being physically hurt, although there has been a few things that have been written that will eventually get dealt with. But what what happened is we were involved with the forum and we did a lot of things, and we were the high, we were basically funded by the DFE via a charity called Contact. So
No.
what happens with that, we aren't going into lots of detail about it, is they give you a grant. So there's a Department for Education grant that's sourced and looked after by a charity called Contact. And then they find a group of parents, this has gone on for years. They find a group of parents who can bring together and create a forum. And in the first year, you create a forum. You're not really accountable for it. You're just building it. It's called building the forum. That's
Yeah,
the
yeah,
first.
yeah, yeah.
Well, that's what we did after the field inspection. Myself, Sophia, and a group of others, we started building it farm. We took grant and so on. Um, the rationale behind that is that so many people said we want a forum like Rotherham, we want a forum like Sheffield, we don't want like Bristol, or not Bristol, Bristol. But what people don't realise is the 17,500 that comes from the DFE is the only money that comes without you having to compromise any principles or anything. Okay?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So when people see a forum like Rotherham doing everything that they're doing, what they don't realize is the idea behind the grant is to offer critical challenge and pay your volunteers sometimes you can pay people, but sometimes it's expensive, sometimes it's creating events for parents to come to get the voice. It's not about being a service, it's not about being a send service. What you are
Yeah,
is your parent voice. So the grant is there for you to generate voice to affect strategic change. But what happens with a lot of these forums is they start getting established, and then local authorities said, "Oh, we'll commission you for some IAS." But you're going to have to create a charity, or you're going to have to create a CIC. And like, oh yeah, that's fine. But it's same people.
yeah,
So when it
yeah, yeah,
comes
yeah.
wanting to not receive bad news, or you wanting something sorted, oh, we could do a bit of parent voice here. You've you're in the pockets
Doing a
because
bit of parent voice.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
you're in the pockets because you've gone from someone who were volunteer or might have been earning 5 grand a year to someone who's now on 35 grand a year, as well as being part of the forum, and you end up dressing and looking like the bloody local authority workers that you were against. And they
Yeah,
come in
yeah,
with
yeah,
the
yeah.
long dresses and the white trainers and the long dresses, and you think to yourself, you look like the people we were supposed to be moderating. So what happens is that people see other forums doing well and think, oh, we want to be like that. We don't want to be like that. What we want is a voice, and we want a group of volunteers that moderates them, that
Yeah,
moderates
yeah,
it.
yeah.
And that's what we were doing, but that weren't good enough and what have you. So the reason why I'm saying all this, because I'm conscious of time, is that was the history of what we were doing. And because we weren't taking any extra monies, we weren't taking any commission, we were just taking our grant. We had two paid workers who were only earning a small amount of money. Sophia and I were complete volunteers, and then we had a steering group that were filling in. And what we were doing, we went into meetings and we told the truth.
Yeah,
And we didn't worry about consequences because no one could stop us because we had our own money, we had our own grant. And it
yeah,
weren't a case of like, oh, well, we'll pull that money, or
yeah.
do you think you could? And not
It's the
very long
same as
after.
us. It's the same as us. We're volunteers. We are totally not for profit. We don't get paid. There's no money coming in. We can't be
No,
influenced financially, and we tell
no.
the truth. It's as simple as that. Yeah,
And we were structured and governanced by the DFE because that's what the DFE, via the code of practice, going full circle,
yeah, yeah,
what the co-production starts, strategic co-production starts with PCFs. You should have a structured PCF.
yeah.
Bear in mind, in the 10 years we've had a code of practice, Barnsley has had a forum for 13 months only. So the DFE recognized way of garnishing and creating and pulling in strategic parent voice has only existed for 13 months in 10 years. And that were us. And we were silenced after 6 months. We were just sat doing no. Well, we weren't sat doing no. We weren't doing any co-production with the sort of authority because they were ignoring us.
How did the
So,
professionals view it? How did they see you when you were
well, this
speaking
was
the
the
truth?
thing. You have these people whose jobs depend on not necessarily allowing or hoping that only the smeller, if you're making a cup of coffee, the smell goes up and the crap in the bottom stays down there. There's people whose jobs it is to just waft the coffee smell up and not let anybody see what's in the filter. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Those people in those positions didn't want us because we were genuine accountability. But then when you get down to that middle level
yeah.
and
Mm.
down to that individual people, staff who were working with you, I were never in a meeting and people who were working at grassroots level or middle management were saying, they were coming and saying, you were brilliant today. Or they were saying to Sophia, Sophia, can you come and do this with us? Or Tracy, Lisa,
Yeah, 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 yeah,
seeing their voice, not just the parent voice, they were seeing the worker voice in there
yeah,
at grassroots level and middle
yeah,
management.
yeah. Absolutely, yeah, yeah, yeah,
So, so we always had I remember a specialist service member of staff come up to me, and I'd done some work with that person, and they got rid of us, and we didn't have time to finish it. And she saw it through, and she come up and apologized. She says, "It were all your idea. We took it through, and it's really worked. So thank you. And I don't want you to tar me with the same brush, Jonathan."
wow.
That's what this person said to me. And she was a senior member of staff. But anyway, what's happened really strangely in the last 3 weeks, and I won't disclose obviously the name, this person's come to me. This person's come to me, and I've no right to use the term whistleblower because it's obviously within your own company, but effectively it's like a form of whistleblowing. And someone's come to me and come to our team and sent private messages, and I know who that person is, and they are in a senior position within our local area services, and uh, they've sent me messages saying that they're worried about what's going on in Barnsley. Now,
Right.
I'm going to read some of these messages out. That's what I'm going to do. But before I do that, I want everybody to know that prior to this, at every single point that controversial stuff and what I would say safeguarding stuff and potentially stuff that needs reporting officially, I've tried to take it to as MPs. I've
Yeah.
tried to take it to a complaints process,
Yes. Yeah, yeah,
right, to CEO at council, to executive directors at council, to chief monitoring officer, to ombudsman, to CQC, and to Ofsted. I've got a
yeah,
trail of all them communications over the last 12 months.
yeah,
And after the last one, the last email I sent to the CEO of the council, because I wouldn't go back down the complaints procedure, we got a legal letter cease and desist, which you know, James.
oh yeah, oh, yeah,
Yeah, we got a cease and desist letter based on digital communication and
yeah.
not following what they were telling us to do for
I think you're
complaints.
doing your job properly, mate. If you've not had one of them. Yeah.
But what it is though, James, is scary. It's
Oh,
scary
it
and
is. Yeah,
it's
yeah,
worrisome because you ain't going. So and what transpires is we will put in posts up that were, not really offensive, not nothing naming anybody, and then this started to come through, and said that they were happy for it to be shared anonymously, and I stayed away from it. This was 8th of May, so we've sat on this. I mean, you've known
Yeah,
about
we
it,
have,
Jim,
yeah, yeah,
and the team know about it. But first message come through on 8th of May, and it read like this: I want you to know, parents to know, we professionals working in Barnsley, I'm so and so, so and so, as just giving job title, as just are just as appalled and frustrated. So this is someone who's working for the ICB.
yeah,
As appalled and frustrated as you parents. What is going on is shambolic. They don't know what they are doing. I don't believe Barnsley fully understands specialist services or additional needs. We offer formulation and advice. It isn't taken well. They get defensive, try to silence us, and don't want to hear/change. The person goes on to say they've been fighting for 4 years now, and they've gone to the top, to commissioners, fighting, advocating for these children's rights, and nothing has changed. It goes on to state Barnsley is causing a huge detriment to their children. There's no diagnostic pathway for learning disability,
yeah.
and, and no post-diagnostic support for ASD, so autism spectrum disorder.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
And you look at what the task and
It's
finish
poor.
group,
Mm,
but it's contradict. The task and finish group are not saying this. Why are they not saying this, James?
mm.
There's been a scrutiny, overview and scrutiny committee gone through this. Why is this not identified in that overview and scrutiny? This is a senior member of staff in ICB. Vague HCPs with the wrong primary need.
Yes, we see that daily. Yeah.
So I keep it fairly, just pose questions really. There is no, so I ask active, what can we do, basically? There is no simple answer. Holding them to account. So just to clarify, it comes up later. This is about the send department. This is what this person's talking about. That's not me saying that. This person. The reference to the send department is, send all the way down.
Yes,
The
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah,
the HPP team and inclusion services.
yeah,
This is
yeah, 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 yeah.
there is no simple answer. Holding them to account and not letting it go is the most important, which is basically talking about campaigning, really. Waiting
Mm.
for some of the dinosaurs who are preventing change to retire, not being afraid to speak up. I know personally I'm an irritant to them, but I continue to advocate for the children and young people. And then I'd given advice the CQC need to be kept informed.
Right.
So effectively, this person's asking me to contact the Ofsted of Health, basically.
Yeah.
Um, I asked, do you think that your opinions of the cultural failings of the HCP team are shared by others in CAMS and other services? We all feel the same. LD, I'll not read that. It's clear our children are not safe if experienced and highly qualified health staff are not being listened to. This person then goes on to name a school saying that they're the worst. I contacted the senior management at that school, and they thanked me for the contact and asked that I keep them abreast of what happens. That school, which were alleged to be the worst one for not dealing with children properly, was Trinity St Edwards. But all I can say is I spoke to them. I told them that they had a right to know, and
Yeah, yeah,
they were polite with me, and I told them what I'd done. I didn't want anything else. I did offer to go and speak with them, but they chose not to have me go up to see them. That's fine. There
mm.
are so many children who haven't even got a diagnosis or school staff aware of their reasons for presentation/behavior. This is what all our parents are saying.
Reflective. That is reflective of the current situation.
All
That's
our
reflective of what we highlighted in our recent report. It's virtually not a million miles away, and we've been shot down and criticised for that. In the well, we have and we haven't. You know what I mean? I think it's widely acknowledged and widely accepted. But yeah, yeah, go on, yeah, carry on.
So much misdiagnosis, and these children don't get the right education provision. This is someone who's working deep in the
I know,
inside.
I know. Yeah,
They end up neat, which is not in education, employment,
yes,
or
absolutely.
and I did notice the other day that the stats are through the roof for neat kids as well. And the ones with a diagnosis, staff don't understand how to support. So then I inquire, are your concerns not listened to at executive leadership of the council? And this person goes on to say, we've all raised it. So there's a number of people. The disabled children's team, who I think you know well, which is a little bit worrying because it's referencing a case that were very serious. Well, I've also raised it at the highest level. So it's saying the DCT have raised it at the highest level. So the DCT are on board with this, is what they're saying, that they feel that this is happening. I just want parents to know many of us are fighting and sticking our neck out for change and improvement. We have a lot of it in our risk register.
Right.
Uh, I went on to say, I think the question is, what are Barnsley problems and what are national issues? And then the other night we had a bit of a situation where someone were commenting and created problems, and this person were actually posting on our page, which just took it to another level. That person then went on to delete it, but anybody who were watching could have seen who this person was. That's why I'm deciding to talk about it now. Sadly, on the shop floor, we can openly say that and have to work with what we have and the realms of what Barnsley has and is allowed to be said. No one genuinely knows how hard we fight and raise concerns to the highest level to the point of being an irritant. I told the person that I'd reported at CQC, I've left the autism strategy steering group. We fed back, it made no sense,
Yeah,
was muddy with no real focus,
yeah, yep, yep, yep.
and missed the entire issue and point. 5 years I've repeated myself as a role. It would give the person away. They got rid of our two positions. We challenged, held them to account. Jobs were disbanded, not being replaced. They know the deficit. This is basically LD nurses, not learning disability nurses, not being replaced. They know they know the deficit. This is executive leadership. They know the detriment. I've given presentations to all the commissioners for ICB, education and social care, and nothing has changed. DCT and CAMS aren't the enemy. I wish parents understood that.
No,
We are all so mad and disappointed with it all. We just can't say anything, which is really scary because what this is a safeguarding issue now.
absolutely, 100%. Yeah,
And it's a child protection issue. And you've got senior members of staff saying that
mhm,
they can't say anything. They're not allowed to say anything.
yeah,
Um, I said I've got an open case with CQC and Ofsted. So that's good. We've been waiting for the inspection and want them to talk to us. We've told send staff, I think, send departments. So that would be like education, head of send, head of inclusion,
EHCP, yeah, 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 but
HCP, participation team. They all
yeah,
fall
yeah.
under local offer, maybe, I'm not sure. We've told Sen we're going to be honest. We have a duty of care to be honest. That's
Good.
right. And I put that's right. If the leadership mentality continues with a lack of accountability from elected officials, then and from elected officials, then it will lead to the most serious circumstances. And I think we all know that
Yeah, I
well. So
believe that. I believe that. Yeah, yeah.
I wish you parents, which is a bit annoying language, but I wish you parents could hear us in these meetings. We've asked for them to be recorded. We write and repeat the chat. We'd say the same thing each and every meeting. None of them want to hear it. I don't know why. I just wanted to share that we empathize and we agree and are equally frustrated and as pissed off and as you are. There's so much that needs to come out, but many of us fear losing our jobs. Bit of fear there would, well, literally fear losing our jobs. Fear. This is fear amongst senior leaders. She's
That's what I
saying,
think. That's the one common thing which kind of runs through all of this. They're kind of controlling this the whole system's controlled by fear,
yeah,
stifled by fear,
I haven't personally seen or
muzzled.
sorry, James. I said about
Yeah,
task and
yeah.
finish group part. I haven't personally seen it. What does it say? I doubt they'd acknowledge anyone. I doubt. Oh, so it's talking about. I doubt they'd acknowledge anyone thinks it's terrible, even though most people think it is.
Mm,
Well, this is talking about the task and finish group, the autism provision in Barnsley, and you've got a senior member of staff. Well, I know who it is. I've reported it to CQC, and they're saying that it's it's rubbish and it's dangerous and they're not listened to. It's not my words. It's
mm,
the words of a paid member of staff.
yeah. A brave member of staff as well. That's hard. I'm going to add to that.
Well,
Because,
unfortunately, I mean, I've looked at this with a lot of trepidation, and I've looked at it, and the fact is that I'm not going to sit on it. I'm not going to sit on it. Now, this is weird. I asked where are the biggest problems in your opinion. So this is a mouthful before we wind it up. The senior leaders, number one, the senior leaders, commissioning et al., don't understand SEND.
yeah,
They don't understand autism, learning disability, or the comorbidity of diagnosis. There is no post-diagnostic support for ASD. Well, yeah, there
yeah, I know
isn't.
that. Yeah, yeah,
There are small pockets of good work like family links. I will agree with that where the parent volunteers are concerned and the parent peer supporters. I will agree with that. But that's as much credit as I'm giving that. Them parents work brilliantly with the parents. But I ain't complimenting Bernardo's as an organisation, not in a million years.
right.
But once given a diagnosis, there needs to be a full bespoke package of support. I have tried to get them to understand this by likening it to asthma. Once you get a diagnosis, once training session, of course, for all doesn't support someone individually. It's bespoke and about how their ASD profile affects and
Yep,
presents.
yep, 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 yep.
90% diagnosis rate for ASD in Barnsley, which means what is being referred in for assessment is correct and only 10%. So when it's being referred, when a kid is asked, when they ask for a kid or a young person to be assessed for it, there's a 90% diagnosis rate. So
Right.
what it's telling me is in our local borough, in our schools, and amongst our
There's
professionals who are
people being missed. People being missed.
well, they're identifying when the people on the ground floor say this kid's autistic, they know how to identify it because 90% are correct.
Yeah,
But how many are being missed?
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Two, there are many children, young people with learning disabilities that aren't being diagnosed. This is due to Barnsley being needs-led, which in many ways, which is great in many ways, but to receive an LD diagnosis, you have to be formally assessed for something. This opens the doors to special services, LD nurses, LD education provisions, and LD annual. So basically what it's saying is that you need a diagnosis for LD to open up. You might not be autistic, but you might have learning disabilities and it's skewing the system because
Yeah,
with learning
yeah,
disability, you're not getting the services that you should be entitled to. From them getting to year seven and becoming neat. So it's saying all them services are not there because there's no LD pathway, just a learning disabled. And what's happening is these kids are on a pathway to basically becoming neat, not in
yeah. That
education.
process does start at year seven, year eight. Definitely 100%. We see that's reflective, 100% reflective. Year seven, year eight, this seems to be a process. And then before you know it, they're either off rolled, home educated, you know what I mean, struggling to get back into education. Yeah,
We also in the YGS being missed, we have diagnosed our youth justice, also in the youth justice system being missed, and we have diagnosed LD. We don't have
Yeah.
LD children's communications now. These posts have not been replaced. Many schools don't understand the level of need, what a certain presentation looks like. What did the CQC say? They said they'll look into it, pass it to inspectors. The lack of change, despite proactive business plans, which were all rejected, ultimately it's the continual detriment for these children and young people, leading to poor health outcomes and for education not being offered the right
Mm.
provision.
And that contradicts completely this new amazing childhood strategy, whatever it is moving forward, what they're trying to portray.
Yeah, just completely
You're
contradicts
all
it.
right. You're all right if you haven't got sand,
Hmm.
is what they're saying.
The
Yeah, stick
forgotten,
with us. You're all right.
yeah, the forgotten
Yeah,
ones. They're becoming,
yeah.
getting bigger.
Shameful. Absolutely shameful. Yeah,
James, I'm absolutely shattered.
I am. It's exhausting. It's been a good talk again. Good
Yeah.
talk, but I do hope we do get some kind of people out there coming forward and having a chat. I know we're going to have a few more of these. We're going to try and do one at least a week. Is that right? Where we're going to kind of
Well, no,
hopefully start inviting people in as well
I think
to join us.
I'd like to go live as many times as possible over next evenings, even if not as long, but just get other people and see if we can get someone volunteering to come in with us tomorrow night or night after, just for an hour.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, let's hit it. We'll do it tomorrow.
Next on its way. Everything's paid for, so let's use it.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Long format,
Yeah.
couple of
Thank you. Thank you,
hours,
everybody.
and we'll be back either tomorrow or day after. And
Let's get a
yeah,
guest on tomorrow.
let's try his best to
Throw
get
it out
it.
there. See if anybody wants to come and join us.
Right, I'm ceasing transmission. I'll leave you on, James. Just in
Uh,
fact, I'll say goodbye, James. Have a good evening,
I'm going to
mate.
go say goodbye, Jet. What's this like? Is this like a comedy show? Goodbye,
Good.
James.